Good morning, everybody. Dear Minister Nikos Dendias, dear Nikos, Your Excellency Ambassador Sofia Gramata, esteemed heads of missions, dear colleagues. Welcome to the second day of our important event, the annual meeting of the Romanian diplomacy. I'm honored and pleased to have my friend Nikos Dendias, Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Hellenic Republic, as special guest today, who kindly answered my invitation to join us in person in Bucharest for this meeting, but also for a very important bilateral visit. Secretary General of the OSCE, Mrs. Helga Schmid, will also join us in this session in a half an hour. Thank you, Nikos, for accepting my invitation during this challenging time and very complicated agendas, I would say. Romania and Greece share, as I just mentioned during the press conference, deep historic, cultural, people-to-people connections. In the spirit of this long tradition, Romania stood by Greece in the fight against wildfires, sending 250 Romanian firefighters, joining the Greek and fellow European forces in fighting against the devastating fires. The activation of the EU Civil Protection Mechanism is a perfect example of what EU solidarity means. Your participation, dear Nikos, in this panel, focused on the security challenges, is illustrative of your country's expertise and dedication to promote peace and stability in this part of the world. Romania and Greece stand and act together in the face of security threats and violations of international law, given that ensuring respect for international law and multilateralism is at the core of our diplomatic efforts and foreign policies. New challenges lie ahead, not only in our proximity, but also in other parts of the world, such as the Afghan crisis, with its possible spillover effects, to mention just the latest. The effects from faraway crises are felt strongly on our doors, which is testament to the small and interconnected world we live in, as you mentioned in the press conference. Dear Nikos, you have a very rich ministerial experience. You served major portfolios in the last decade: justice, public order, citizens' protection, development and competitiveness, national defense. As the head of the Greek diplomacy, you have been a very active promoter of the core values that we share. And I recall the teleconference we co-organized last May in support of the European perspective of the Western Balkans, which is also an essential determinant of our external action. I believe I speak for us all gathered here virtually and physically when saying that we look forward to hearing your input on this matter of common concern, that is how to deal with actual security challenges, which lessons to learn, so we can anticipate and respond better to future crises. So I pass the floor to you, Nikos, to share your vision to all of us. Thank you.
Bună dimineața, dragă ministru, draghi ambasadori. I would like to thank you most warmly for the honor you made me to address this year's Romanian Ambassadors' Annual Conference on the occasion of the Diplomacy Day. And I have to say that I would like also to thank you for the help that Romania has provided us during the wildfires in Greece in the summer. This is greatly appreciated, not just by the Mitsotakis government, but also by the Greek people. Before going any further, I would like to pay tribute to one of your distinguished colleagues, Georgi Ciamba, a friend of mine, the Romanian ambassador in Greece. Georgi, during his tenure, contributed substantially in deepening our bilateral ties. I was happy to hear that last year we celebrated 140 years of diplomatic relations. There are not many countries in the world that have such long-standing and excellent relations. And next year, you will be celebrating the 160th anniversary of the foundation of the Romanian Foreign Ministry. It is an interesting coincidence that the first Romanian Foreign Minister, Apostolos Arsakis, was of Greek origin. And I'm pretty certain that if Bogdan was ever to replace me as Greek foreign minister, not only he would do an outstanding job in upholding the principles of international law, but also, if you'll allow me to say, maybe quite a number of Greek diplomats would be particularly happier. Greece and Romania are linked through historic ties. We have fought for our independence in the 19th century. We have fought alongside each other during the Balkan Wars. The treaty that ended the Second Balkan War, a landmark treaty for Greece, was signed by one of our most charismatic Prime Minister, Eleftherios Venizelos, here in Bucharest, in the capital of Romania. We fought alongside each other in the First World War. And more recently, Greece has been a firm supporter of Romania's accession to the European Union and NATO. And we are almost to the gaze allies and partners. And Greece is actively contributing to the Black Sea security by participating in the NATO maritime group. As I mentioned earlier today, Greece will continue to support Romania's bid to join the Eurozone, the Schengen, and the OECD. Today, I would like to focus on the challenges we are facing and how we can best address them by working together. May I identify three categories of challenges? The first one is what I would call the challenge of values and principles. Both our countries are firm supporters of a rules-based international order, fully respecting international law. Both Greece and Romania attach particular importance to the respect of the international law of the sea, including the right to freedom and navigation. These principles are shared by our European Union partners, by the most NATO allies, and many countries in the broader region. But there is a minority, unfortunately also within our alliance, that not only do not respect those rules, but actively undermine them by using military forces abroad, by occupying foreign territories, by using proxies and even mercenaries. What is even more worrying is that we observe a rise of autocracies in the neighborhood. Countries that had established or at least functioning democratic institutions are sliding back, on many occasions contrary to the will and the interests of their own people and their own societies. Worse, these countries seem to develop some sort of closer ties, synergies between them, transcending established frameworks such as the NATO alliance. Unless contained, these forces may come to dominate the scene. Therefore, it is the duty of the countries that uphold fundamental principles such as Greece and Romania, together with other like-minded countries, to erect a barrier to the expansion of instability. The second major challenge, which is of course linked to the first, is the risk of stability and prosperity vacuum in our immediate neighborhood. I'm especially referring to those countries left in the twilight zone, close to the European Union, but not part of the European Union. The most obvious case is the Western Balkans. They are making substantial efforts in order to become members of our European family, and they do need our support, and they do need a very clear perspective. It is our duty, the duty of those who are already part of the European Union, like Romania, like Greece, to help them. This is in their interest, but allow me to say this is also to our interest, to the European interest. For the very simple reason that unless the European Union covers the emerging vacuum, others that do not share our principles, that do not share our ideologies and values, will try to cover it. The same principle, exactly the same principle, applies for our Eastern partners. I will be visiting Moldova in a few hours' time. This will be the first visit by a Greek foreign minister in years, maybe decades. I will carry with me a very simple message. We support Moldova's European aspirations. And Moldova will have to carry the necessary reforms that will bring her closer to Europe. And I will reiterate Greece's strong commitment to the Eastern Partnership. Greece and Romania have taken a series of initiatives in several international institutions. For instance, last May, we jointly organized a European Union Foreign Ministers meeting on the Western Balkans with the participation of our counterparts from Albania and North Macedonia. But we should not rest. We have to continue our common engagement. That brings me to the third major challenge we are facing. A few weeks ago, Romanian firefighters provided substantial help to Greece in order to extinguish wildfires. Wildfires that per se are not defined, at least in the past, as a security challenge, but they are. And they are a symptom of a broader transnational challenges that no single country can address on its own. There are many things that fall under this category: climate change, pandemics, mass migratory movements. They seem, at first glance, completely distinct challenges, but taking a closer look, they have one important common denominator. They are aggravated by the effects of globalization. Globalization, or if you prefer, we can call it mondialization, it is not in itself something bad. We believe rather the opposite. But it means that a challenge in one part of the world rapidly affects other parts of the world very quickly. Today, no country, big or small, can erect barriers to stop migration, to stop the effects of climate change or pandemic. It can take actions to mitigate the effects, but it cannot prevent the phenomena. The answer to these challenges is, as far as I can imagine, pretty straightforward: solidarity. Those of us who are better off have to help those of us in need. Yesterday, I was in Tunis, delivering 100,000 vaccines to the Tunisian people. And the day before, I received in Athens the Libyan foreign minister, to whom we donated 200,000 vaccines. And the list goes on. As I said before in a press conference, Afghanistan, so far, yet consequences-wise so close. Unless we take mitigating measures, the effects of massive migratory movements, the rise of extremist forces, will come to challenge the well-being of our societies. Unless we work together, unless we show solidarity, especially among us, European Union partners, no one will be immune. Ladies and gentlemen, this was a sobering assessment of what lies ahead. I did not paint a rosy picture because the picture is not rosy. But we should not lose hope because the challenges are huge. On the contrary, we should join forces in order to overcome the challenges of today and the challenges of tomorrow. Only by working together, we will become more resilient. And this is why I'm in Bucharest today. Not in order to address inexistent differences between our countries, but in order to help joining forces and see how we can help each other, how we can help other countries in our neighborhood, how we can help other countries of the world. Thank you so much for the honor to address you.
Well, thank you so much, dear Nikos, for your very insightful presentation. This ends the public part of this session. We will continue shortly with our debate. speak at our reunion. Romania, as you know, is strongly attached to the OSCE concept of security, comprehensive and cooperative security, rooted in the principles of the Helsinki Final Act. The organization has played, after and before the Cold War, an important role. And Romania has actively participated in the negotiation of the Conference on Security and Cooperation in Europe, and then OSCE. From the very beginning, we were involved from the very beginning in this process and in drafting the fundamental documents of the organization. Today, of course, we face serious challenges that affect our security. We have the protracted conflicts in the OSCE area. We have erosion of confidence and security building measures. We have, of course, the effects of the pandemic, transnational threats, terrorism, climate change, technological revolution effects, digitalization, artificial intelligence, and also lack of good governance and sometimes lack of goodwill, good political will in solving these problems. So the list can continue. I think the only way to tackle such challenges is working together, engaging with each other in good faith. And OSCE, from this perspective, offers a unique platform for inclusive security dialogue. And I think this platform and the toolkit that we have should be used in good faith, with the willingness of staying loyal to the fundamental principles and commitments. Indeed, we can say that our security is intrinsically linked to the security of our neighbors. That's why the protracted conflicts in the wider Black Sea region are important for us. We need to try to solve them because they represent a continuing violation of international law principles and norms. As you know, during well, this year and last year, Nikos knows very well, I have promoted within the EU an in-depth discussion on how EU can be more active in solving the protracted conflicts in the Black Sea region. We have discussed in depth this issue at the Gimnich meeting in Portugal at the end of May. And we have decided to stay focused on what we can do in terms of supporting our partners, in terms of being more active as an EU to well, solve these conflicts. Together with my Austrian and Lithuanian counterparts, we paid a visit at the end of June in the South Caucasus countries. And we have come back to the Foreign Affairs Council and presented our conclusions with a set of proposals. Well, it is for me an honor to have you here with us, even if virtually, and I would like to offer a brief presentation, although your activity is very well known to all of us. Mrs. Schmid has held several prominent diplomatic positions during her career. Early on, she was political advisor to the German Foreign Minister, Klaus Kinkel, and head of cabinet to Foreign Minister Joschka Fischer. Just prior to her appointment as OSCE Secretary General, she was Secretary General of the European External Action Service. From 2011 to 2016, she was the Deputy Secretary General for Political Affairs for the European External Action Service. Preceding that, she was the Director of the Policy Planning and Early Warning Unit of the High Representative for the CFSP in the General Secretariat of the Council of the European Union in Brussels. So let me offer to you the floor, Secretary General, and after that we will have a number of questions and answers. So, Secretary General, please, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear and see you.
Thank you. No, first of all, thank you so much for inviting me to your Ambassadors Conference. It's a real pleasure to see you again, and it's both of you, also Nikos, and it's an honor for me to participate at your Ambassadors Conference. And I think you gave a perfect introduction, describing very well the challenges, the current security challenges we're all facing in the EU, but also in the bigger family of the OSCE. I was also following your visit to the South Caucasus with great interest, and maybe I'll come a bit later also to, I think, the areas where also the EU and the OSCE can work very closely together in support of cooperative security. I don't have to go into the analysis of the threats and challenges. I think you named it. What I would say is that when tensions are high, we need multilateral diplomacy and cooperation more than ever. And this also goes for the OSCE. And let me just maybe start with one area that's of particular concern for me. And this is the conventional arms control architecture that was built in the 90s, one of the really big achievements of this organization. What we are seeing now is, of course, that architecture is being eroded. We have a more risk-prone environment, as you just also mentioned. We have a low transparency when it comes on military activities. And then you have the additional threats that come from new technologies. Just take hypersonic weapons or drones in swarms, or also a situation where artificial intelligence appears on the battlefield. So the human being may not even be in the loop anymore. Now, I don't want to dramatize, but I think these are real scenarios. And this is why here the OSCE really offers a very good platform, because everyone is around the table. There's the structured dialogue, which is very much driven by the participating states, and which is actually one of the few far left where we also have military-to-military context. Again, this is the responsibility of our participating states, but I see I've raised it right from the beginning, and I try also from my point of view to raise awareness and to promote this discussion as much as possible. But I also have to say that despite the challenges, when it comes to disarmament, arms control, the OSCE still has developed the world's most advanced regime of confidence building and transparency measures and verification procedures, but also early warning mechanism. I think this is very good to recall. And it's interesting that when I talk to some of our partner countries or countries outside, they look with a lot of interest, particularly in Asia, to what the OSCE has achieved. And that includes also, for example, safe storage and destruction of small arms and light weapons and conventional ammunitions, where the OSCE has helped destroy more than 10 million items of small weapons so far. I always give that figure because I think it's very, it tells a good story. But, and I think you also referred to that, the OSCE has early on realized that security is not only about the military, but is a lot broader, and that's precisely this broad, comprehensive approach to security, which is political-military aspects, but it's also economic, environmental issues, and of course, human rights. And as we're talking about security challenges, I very much believe, and this is of course a discussion I remember very well from the European Union, is that economic and environmental issues are key factors in building security. And this is why also with our field missions, we are helping to promote building of good governance, fight against corruption, sustainable water management, for example, and then take climate change. That's an area also where I would also like the EU and the OSCE to even work more closely together. This has really emerged as, I think, it's the leading global security challenge in 2019. Then it was overtaken by the pandemic, but it has for sure not gone away. And it's interesting that the Helsinki, and frankly, I had to reread it myself. The Helsinki Act already refers to the need to tackle climate phenomena, and in 1975. So I think this was quite a foresight at the time. And here, I think there is this is certainly an area where we have to focus even more. And then you have the third dimension, which is human and fundamental freedoms, which is the bedrock of stable societies. So many of our 16 field missions support their host countries when it comes to justice, electoral reform, medium of the media, or rights of persons belonging to national minorities. That's the mandate for the representative for the freedom of the media, or for our High Commissioner on national minority rights. But also the work they do to promote tolerance and non-discrimination. Now, security is, of course, not only about states, and what's really at stake is people's lives. And this is women and men, children, families, individuals, and communities. And for me, this is very, very important. So this is why I want to flag Ukraine, because that's an area where we are very, very much engaged. I know traditionally also very high on your radar screen. I was in Eastern Ukraine in May. I witnessed the devastating impact the conflict has on ordinary people. I saw for myself how the restrictions on the crossing on the contact line make it really hard for elderly people to collect their pensions, for students to take their exams, but also for humanitarian organizations to do their work. And the young people I met were very concerned that their lack of contact with the peers on the other side of the contact line is feeding alienation, but it's also reinforcing reinforcing divides. And this is, I think, the work our special monitoring mission in Ukraine does. And I would also like to thank Romania for your support in this context. We have over 800 monitors from 40 countries. So it's really an objective mission. And they really help. They are not only our eyes and ears on the ground and monitor the ceasefire, they also help de-escalate tensions. They broker local ceasefires, and this is what many people don't know. They broker local ceasefires. They are called windows of silence, which really allows the mission to do repairs to critical infrastructure that was damaged in the fighting, to provide for safe drinking water, sanitation. So it's really millions of people on both sides of the contact line that actually have benefited from that. But the OSCE also facilitates the political talks when it comes to a peaceful resolution of the crisis. The Trilateral Contact Group, which is OSCE, Ukraine, and Russia. So the OSCE is acting as an honest broker in spheres where maybe others cannot. As we are talking about the conflicts, and of course conflict resolution is one of the key is one of our key engagement, this is of course very close to you. This is the Transnistrian settlement process, where we have seen that agreements can be reached and implemented when there are shared interests and benefits, and there is renewed momentum. So there was also good atmosphere between the mediators and the observers during the visit to Chisinau and Tiraspol in June. There's a clear commitment by your colleague Ann Linde, who is of course our current chair and is very much engaged, and I'm very grateful for that. There's a clear commitment also to have a 5+2 meeting later this year. And that would be, of course, very important to keep the Transnistrian settlement process on track. You mentioned your trip to the South Caucasus. Here also dialogue and pragmatism is critical to build security and confidence. We just had the anniversary of the 100th Incident in Prevention and Response Mechanism in Almaty 2 or 3 months ago. This is part of the Geneva International Discussions, where the OSCE is working hand in hand also with the EU and our UN partners. I'm sure I could not join for the previous session, but I'm sure that what was discussed also was the work that is done by the EU, but also by our OSCE mission in the Western Balkans. I would highlight particularly our field mission in Bosnia-Herzegovina and Kosovo that have been vital, and also have been engaging in spaces where others may not be able to engage. Now, conflict prevention is really at the core of our everyday work. And I would just draw your attention, I don't want to be too long, to maybe 2 more areas which are important in the EU, but also where, because of the network we have, also our 57 participating states, there's a lot of work we do in an area where I see more and more challenges. And one of them is the transnational challenges. Of course, there's terrorism. I mean, the new situation in Afghanistan, which presents a real challenge for all of us, but particularly for the neighboring countries. But then there is cybercrime, trafficking in drugs, arms, and human beings. And I really would like to highlight trafficking in human beings. This has become a real urgency. It's been going up big time in the pandemic. It's both a security issue, it's a human rights issue. It's also a symptom of structural inequalities, particularly economic and gender inequality. And it has impacted particularly the most vulnerable. In more than 90% are women. And we're doing a lot of work. There's OSCE. There are some 25 million victims of human trafficking globally. Very few are prosecuted. And there's also technology angle, as the success of states will depend in part whether they are prepared to prevent its misuse. But technological developments, of course, created also new opportunities in the field of anti-trafficking. We are doing a lot of work there through research, also partnerships with the private sector, and we're also carrying out an ambitious project to prevent labor exploitation in the supply chain to the goods and services we buy, and we're now co-chairing with the ILO a high-level task force at the UN to promote similar measures there. We work closely with Interpol and others. I just wanted to highlight it because I think this is really one of the key challenges that will remain with us. I mentioned the new technologies, artificial intelligence. They are double-edged sword, actually, because they can fuel further mistrust and competition between states and, of course, have unforeseen security threats if they fall into the hands of terrorist groups or criminal networks. On the other hand, artificial intelligence also offers opportunities that can support law enforcement cooperation across borders. And in which way it goes, I think, will ultimately depend on the willingness of states, but also the private sector to work together and to engage in confidence-building measures. This has been a bit, I see this a bit as the continuation also of the work I did in Brussels when we created the Global Tech Panel, which brought together top-level private sector business, people with diplomacy. Now in the EU it was more about norms and standards, and here in the OECD it's about confidence-building measures and capacity building. And this is also, for example, on cyber, if you take cyber. Here, what the OECD has created, and COVID-19 may have been a watershed moment also when it comes to cybersecurity. Because, I mean, digitalization was well underway before, but the pandemic has forced us to embrace technology and in a new manner, but with that, the inherent risks are at an even greater speed. So what we have created in the OSCE is a network of national points of contact, both at the political policy level, but also technical experts, to ensure rapid notification, but also crisis connection in the case of a cyber incident, meaning we may not be able to prevent one, but we can make sure at least that things don't spiral too much out of control. These are just some of the examples I wanted to give. I think these are talking about security challenges. This will stay with us, probably even become worse. Allow me maybe two final words, because I don't want to be too long. The pandemic has disproportionately affected women. I think it has jeopardized much of the progress we have made towards gender equality. So, and this is in the OSCE, we strongly believe that we have to put women at the center of the post-pandemic recovery. And this means that women have a meaningful role in decision-making, transforming institutions, but also when it comes to economic empowerment. So there we do a lot of programs, capacity building from Central Asia to Southeast Europe. And maybe last word is that, and this brings me back to what I said in the beginning, is the current geopolitical tensions that of course are reflected also inside the organization. And I would really thank both Greece and Romania for your support also inside the OSCE, because we are facing tensions. So that's why I'm just back from Helsinki, where I had a very interesting meeting also with the Finnish president, who has launched a bit of discussion about what he calls the Helsinki Spirit. And it's good to remember that really in the midst of the Cold War, adversaries came together and launched an area of confidence building that really helped build stability and security in our region for decades, even if the conventional arms control architecture is being challenged. And I think we need a bit of that courage and commitment of our predecessors who put aside their differences to work together to prevent probably what could have been at the time a new war. And I think that's in this context, the 50th anniversary of the Helsinki Final Act, which is not so far away in 2025, offers a good opportunity to renew our commitment to dialogue, but also to cooperative security. So my closing sentence will be, this is why I think the OSCE is now more needed than ever, because it has the framework, the platform, but also the tools to strengthen stability and to make sure that we can pursue peaceful solutions together, which does not mean, of course, that we have any interest in compromising on our commitments, the Helsinki commitments. They are not for sale, but we have to see how we can recommit and how we can also recommit to cooperative security. Sorry if I was too long, but thanks again for giving me that opportunity to address the Ambassadors' Conference.
No, thank you so much, Secretary General. It was not too long. I think it was extremely interesting and comprehensive. And I think I very much agree with what you said at the end of your presentation as a conclusion. There is such a rich set of instruments, of mechanisms, of documents, of opportunities which are still there in the OSCE. And I think what we need is, for some of them at least, some more political will to use them in order to solve the problems that we have. We have so many challenges before us, and at the same time we have a good set of instruments within the OSCE. And well, this, I mean, the efficiency of the OSCE can be very well noticed when we take a look at the activity of autonomous institutions and the field missions, where, well, they are less dependent on certain political clashes between or among the participating states. And since you mentioned the protracted conflicts, and you also made a reference to Transnistria, and since yesterday I met in Bucharest my good colleague and friend Nicu Popescu, and Nikos here will meet him in a couple of hours today. Let me tell you that we have discussed, and we have discussed also between us today about Transnistria and how we see the way forward. Well, I would like to ask you, well, a short question about that, to start a series of questions of our ambassadors. How do you see the issue of, well, solving the problem of the ammunition depot in Kobasna? Do you think there is a real chance to move forward with the implementation of the Istanbul summit commitments as far as the ammunition is concerned, at least, because we know that as far as the